All right, what's up, everyone? It's Zach, and today I'm here with a very special guest. I am here with Domenica Coka. How are you tonight?
I'm great. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me, Zach.
Good. Of course, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the podcast. Super excited to have you, and to everyone that's listening back home. Domenica is a really, really awesome, super kind, positive, wonderful person.
Oh,
And her background is in music. She's a singer-songwriter. Most recently, put out her EP, which I'm sure we will talk a bit about. But
yeah.
currently in Nashville pursuing music.
Yes, that's
Yes.
true.
Yeah, so that's a little bit about Dominica, but do you mind kind of sharing with the listeners a little bit about yourself, your background, who you are, all the fun stuff?
Absolutely. Originally I'm from, well, I was born in Miami, Florida, but both of my parents are from Ecuador, South America. I am the youngest of 8 kids. Most of my siblings are half siblings, but like we're all one big happy family. I am I have 6 brothers and 1 sister. Like I said, I am the baby. So that makes me, I'd like to say, the princess of the family. Yeah, I love music. I've always grown up singing. I've never thought any different I thought it was the same in the sense of singing was just everyone loved to do. And um through trials that I went through with my family, singing was kind of an escape for me. Music was the escape, and um, I, I used music, the storytelling in music, to kind of put me in a different world for like a hot second, and then bring me back to reality and use what I kind of learned in those songs to strengthen me, I guess. And I think that there's so much power in music that it can bring so much joy, and it just allows you to feel so many emotions. And I think it's healthy to process emotions that sometimes we tend to bottle up. And I speak for myself that I used to be someone who used to bottle up their emotions, and I've learned that it's really important to express them in a very healthy and controlled way. Um, I grew up in the church. I started singing when I was like 11, like middle school age, like 6th grade. I went to a small private Christian school, so led worship there. And I started leading worship at my church when I was like 14 or 15. And I loved it. It was my safe haven. And I knew when I was 16 or 17 that I really, really wanted to pursue this. And I didn't just want to be a bedroom singer. So I started auditioning for all of the reality TV shows that are out there. I started out with The Voice, and did the whole 9 yards. And there's a lot that goes behind the scenes that I think a lot of people don't really know, and we can get into details of that if you'd like. Um, I did America's Got Talent, I did American Idol, and then I did The Voice again this past season, season 23, which was so crazy. And yeah, and I've been writing in the midst of it. In 2020, I released my first single called Alone with my friend slash producer Sanka Wen, who I met through Twitter because she saw Joshua Bassett retweeted me. And so we have Joshua Bassett to thank for the launching of my
Yes.
career, which I would love to tell him and be friends with him one day. So that's one thing. Joshua, if you're listening, hey, let's be friends.
We're putting it out here right now.
Yeah, right
It's
here,
gonna
right
happen.
now. Yeah, no, honestly, like I feel like we could totally be friends. But
I could
like,
see it.
thanks. I feel like it'd be fun. Um, but yeah, and then from then on started releasing other songs, and then this past November started writing for what now is my EP. It started out as just therapeutic music that I was like, I'm not even gonna dare to release this because this is so vulnerable and so honest.
Hmm.
And then I had a great conversation because my mom is angelic and wise beyond her years. I don't the woman has is amazing and I love her. And I'm so grateful that she's my best friend. And she was like, Dominica, like it doesn't matter whether like how old you are, anyone can relate to these songs because it is a very
Hmm.
universal feeling. And it doesn't even have to be that they've been in the same position that you've been. It could be that they're in the opposing position that they've been, but they can better understand just relationships in general. And yeah, and I can go into depth of like where I'm at now with all of like the EP and like where I feel about this past season of my life. And yeah, so I'm just like feeling really grateful and excited to see what goes on from here.
Yeah, it's an exciting time, and I appreciate you sharing all of your backstory or a lot of your backstory about
Yeah,
how you got into music and just how much it's been kind of going from like just something you enjoyed to maybe like an escape to being just a form of self-expression and,
absolutely.
therapy. And I think that that's something that people sometimes underestimate the power that music can have, whether
Mm,
it's to listen to it or to do it yourself. And, I think that it's a wonderful thing. And, to kind of branch off something you said, you talked about how with the songs you're writing for the EP,
mhm.
they required you to be very vulnerable.
Yeah.
And that's what I was going to ask. I was going to ask, like, I mean, so it sounds like you did have that initial, like, a little worry about, like, oh, I don't want to put that out there. That's too
Oh my
personal.
gosh.
That's too vulnerable. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, 1000%. So to give you kind of like, not kind of like a timeline of all
Hmm.
of it. I started writing 24. All of the songs are written in the exact order that they are on the track list, and that was not necessarily like intentional. It's kind of just how it happened. That's exactly what the track list needed to be. Um, and 24. So my birthday is November 30th, and I was
Okay.
turning 24. And I started writing it like at work. I started like typing lyrics that, were modified later on, but um I was like, this is exactly how I'm feeling today. Like I will say my birthday, I'm not someone who like loves to be the center of attention. But on my birthday, like that's different. Like I love my
Okay.
birthday and I want every person who's like celebrating their own birthday to feel that same way. I don't understand people who like don't like their birthdays. I'm like, how? Like this is your day. Like I want you to feel special, like all this stuff. And one of my best friends that I wrote a couple of my songs with is the exact same way. Um with birthdays, and so this was, like, the first birthday that, like, really sucked, and I I was just, like, in my feels, obviously, because it was so fresh, and I was writing everything, and I remember being, like, literally in my apartment bathroom floor crying and, like, writing, like, actually with my guitar this time, writing 24, like, modifying it, things that I've already written, and I sent it to my producer, Sanka, and I was like, "I'm just sharing this with you because, like, I'm in my feels, like, this is the perfect time to, like, write songs, but, like, these songs are never coming out." And especially because there was, like, there's specific lines that I was like, "Oh my gosh," like, that, uh like, yes, this is what I'm feeling right now, but I know that I know deep inside, like, if I like, for example, I'm gonna be very straight up. Like the line that says, "You told me you loved me, said you wanted to marry me. Was that all for show?" I was so scared of that line because I know, in the situation that I was going through, that that was very real. Like
Mhm.
I knew that that was like a real feeling. Like we were very serious and wanted to marry each other, but in the moment, I was very much, like, questioning, "Was that really real?" Because I think that's so normal. That is
Yeah.
such a normal feeling. But I of course, like, I look back and I'm like, "I know that that was real." Like, I know that
Yeah.
everything that was shared was real and truthful and, like, all this stuff. But in the midst, you're like, "Oh my gosh," like, you start to question everything and start to
Mhm.
question, um was did I not love enough? Did I not, like, say all like, and it has
Yeah.
nothing to do with any of that, but you want to kind of, like, find the answers.
Yeah.
You're trying to make it make sense, you know?
Yes. Yep.
And so, yeah, being vulnerable was really hard because I feel like with my other songs, there is a sense of vulnerability and, like, Alone and Sweeter and Vivid Dreams because they were all written from a very real place.
Mhm.
Um whether that was the feeling that I was depicting was exactly what I was feeling, it still was a very real thing. Like
Yeah.
Sweeter, I was not in love with anybody at the time, but I was writing it from a place of, man, I wish that someone was making me feel this way.
Right.
And I later dedicated that song to someone who actually did make me feel that way. And I was like, wow, like this is exactly what it should feel like. And I
Mhm.
did feel that way. But this one was very different because it was telling a story
Yeah.
instead. It wasn't just, like, writing lyrics, I guess, or trying to, like, make it match the melody or whatever. It was, like, really focusing on the storytelling of each
Mhm.
individual song that cohesively, like, went with every single other track for that EP. So it didn't require a lot of tears, a lot
Yeah.
of vulnerability, and a lot of just, like, straight up honesty with myself.
Mhm.
But a lot of honoring and a lot of gratitude and a lot of grace and love too. I mean, this was an outpouring of love for me.
Mhm.
Um, because it's my it was my experience, it was my healing process, it was therapy for me. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Man, I love hearing just, like, the backstory of it, and I mean, I full disclosure, honesty, whatever you wanna call it, like, I
Yeah.
listened to it and I was like, like, in the best way possible, like, it just, like, broke me, the whole EP,
Oh,
like, I just felt so much and, like, just my own experiences, I felt
yeah.
for, you as the singer and songwriter and everything, and just for
Yeah.
anyone that's had any relatable experiences,
Yeah.
and, it was one of those things where I just heard it and I was like, "This is incredible, it tells a story," and
Oh,
I mean,
thank
like,
you.
of course, and, like, I don't I'm weird and, like, I won't like, albums or EPs on Spotify, like, I don't know, it just, like, clutters my library, so I
No,
don't
that's
do
so
it,
fair. Yeah.
but, like, I have yours saved. I'm not,
Oh,
like,
thank
joking, I saved it the
you.
day it came out, I listened to it once, and I was like I listened to it at, like, midnight as
Oh
soon
my
as it came out.
gosh.
I
Yeah, because I
pre-saved it,
because
I
I
did all
because
that.
I remember you posting about it, and I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
thanks."
Exactly, yeah, so, like, I genuinely I loved it, and
Thank
to
you.
hear what went into it, I
Yeah,
think is just so incredible, and it shows a lot of vulnerability, a lot of strength,
thank
courage, and
you.
just wanting to just share that experience and not be
Mhm.
afraid of it or not, even invalidate, like, the feelings that have felt in the past or your experience because it
Yeah,
is part of who you are, and it as cliche as it might be, it's made you who you are to this
totally.
day.
Totally. Absolutely. And that was something that I, came to terms with the more I was writing my songs because I
Mhm,
think so easily you can get into a room and wanna write something and other people are wanting you to write something so different.
mhm,
I think that we are used to having a lot of breakup sad songs turn into like pointing the finger.
yeah,
And we don't get to hear a lot of the opposite of just like,
mhm,
man, this really hurt, but like I still love you, you know?
yeah,
And you don't get to hear that as often. And I wasn't doing it to like, oh, because this is different. It genuinely was just like because I was like, I'm not gonna let anyone tell me what I should be writing because like they deserve to hear that or whatever, which I don't think anyone deserves to like you can see the harm that people have received when it's like um pointing the finger when it's, like,
mhm,
intentionally just trying to get revenge or whatever. I
yeah,
think that that is very harmful and, harmful not only to the other person, but harmful to yourself and also just harmful to the relationship that was something that you were in, you know?
mhm,
And I had people jokingly, like, say things like, "Oh, you should say this, you should say that." I'm like, "No, because that's not what I feel. Like, why should I
right,
say that?" And, there are other situations where, like, it's so tricky because as a songwriter, like, you should be honest with
yeah,
how you're feeling, and sometimes it is like, you wanna say something that is a little bit more sarcastic or a little bit more like, twisting the knife, but I
yeah,
think with my situation, that was not what I wanted to perceive, and that
mhm,
was something I think was I was really scared of. I was scared that, like, people were gonna misinterpret my songs and think that I was painting someone to be a villain, which is so by far the not what I was intending to do at all, and I am so grateful that I haven't had a single person, like, make it about the other person, if that makes sense. It's
yeah,
been about, like, "Thank you for your honesty, thank you for your bravery, like, I can see myself in this," or, like, "I know what this feels like, and I'm so sorry you went through it, like, I can hear the pain in
mhm,
your voice, but thank you. Thank you for loving, like I can hear the love in the songs and stuff." So and
yeah,
that is not to by any means to toot my own horn because all I was doing was, like, truly just, like, an outpour of my heart, like, that's it,
yeah.
and even being so scared of that, I was like, "This is what I have to do, and this is what I wanna do," because I'm doing it for me too.
Exactly. Yeah, and I mean, just to give a little context to you and to, I guess, anyone listening as well, like, I was in a pretty long-term, very great relationship for almost 5 years,
Oh,
and
wow.
it was super great and loving, and, I had a great experience, and,
Yeah.
it didn't work out, and
Mhm.
we went our separate ways, and it's that weird experience of relationships where like I had a lot of people close to me saying like, oh, like, you know, don't you regret those 5 years, or don't you want to just
Yeah.
like, never want to see that person or tell anyone, or don't you want to just like hate them and go
Yeah.
burn all the pictures and,
Yeah.
all this stuff. And it's like, no, like I have so much love for this person still. Like, and
Absolutely.
just because we're not gonna work out long term, that doesn't mean like I regret the experiences
Exactly.
of the times or the love or like, anything like that. So I think that that's another thing that like I just felt on a personal level, just listening to the EP. It's like,
Mm.
it's okay to feel, like you said, like it's okay to feel that pain and to go through
Mhm.
those heartbreaks and that tough times, but still have so much love
Yes,
for just the
absolutely.
experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So and I do think like, like you said, it's for you too. So I think
Mhm.
like a lot of people will say when we do things like maybe, I've had people say this about the podcast, and maybe you've heard it about music. It's like, oh, you're doing these things for other people. And it's like maybe to a layer, but it's
Yeah.
also kind of selfish, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah, it can be, yeah.
where it's like talking about our own experiences, or like using our own creative endeavors to like be therapy for us and to share our experiences and stories, and we
Yeah,
want people to benefit and to enjoy it and to relate to it, but at the same
absolutely.
time like we're getting so much, just whether it's closure or
Mhm.
just more clarity on the situation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's
Yeah,
I think it was Ed Sheeran that said, that you shouldn't be releasing music that is just, like, for the rest of the world, like, you have to love it yourself too.
yeah, yeah,
Like, you have to
definitely.
be also your biggest fan, and I was like, "Wow,
Yes.
yeah, you're right."
Now, do you feel like you have always been your biggest fan?
That's a great question. Probably not.
Okay.
I think any creative is their worst critic.
Yeah.
And there are times where I find myself, like, absolutely hating, like, any cover that I've posted or any video that I've, like, posted, that took me, like, 30 times to, quote, unquote,
Really?
"perfect" it. Yeah, oh my gosh, of course, because I'm like, "Oh, that didn't sound as good," or like, "Oh, I could have done this better," or, like, whatever. But I think that when it comes to, like, creating music, I love the fact that music is always evolving, and I love the fact that I am also learning that as an artist, I'm always evolving because this EP is so different from anything else I've released.
Right.
This is not very R&B soulful. It's like we pulled inspo from, like, Old Miley and Old Demi.
Yeah.
And so, like, we were really focusing on the lyrics and wanting to make sure hold on, my screen on my computer, like, locked out, and I don't like that it did that, so
All
ho
good. No worries.
hopefully you can still hear me.
I can hear you perfectly.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
But just, like, I think, I we allowed the music, like, to take its own direction
Mhm.
according to what it needed to sound like, and I think with Sanka, my producer, we were like, 24, oh my gosh, we hated that song. Like, I
Really?
when I first wrote it, I loved it, but once you start getting into production, like, trying to bring it to life, when you get stuck on something, like, it is one of the worst feelings ever, and I just remember I recorded those vocals, like, 4 times because I
Mm.
hated the way that I thought I sounded so screechy and sounded just, like, disgusting, and then, and we were recording it with who co-produced it, Rich Harris, who's great, and he was like, "Watch you guys, like, love this song at the end," and I love that one, and it's so
Yeah.
crazy to think that, like, you can hate something, and then when you take a step back from it and, like, start afresh, like, it can so easily become one that you absolutely love, and
Yeah.
I mean, I think I'm gonna go through different seasons of which ones are gonna be my favorites, but this is the first time where I can actually listen to my songs in the car and, like, wanna sing to them. Because other times I'm like, "Oh, I don't wanna hear myself. I've heard this song too many times," and maybe I'll get there with this
Yeah.
EP, but, like, I love listening to these songs because it's like, sometimes I can step away and, like, not think that it's me and just, like, listen to the lyrics and, like, belt, like,
Yeah.
scream sing them, in the car.
I love that.
So yeah.
Okay. And I know you said it probably will change with different seasons of life and
Yeah.
just what have you, but as of right now, this current moment, what would be your favorite song from the
Oh my
EP?
gosh, that's so hard because they're all, like, I mean, they're me, like, they're just me.
Yeah.
But I think I'm gonna say 2.
Okay.
I'm gonna say Notes Page is definitely up there.
Yeah.
Just because that one was so I wrote that with Grace Elizondo, one of my best friends. And it was one of those that was the first song we've ever written together, and we've been friends for 4 years, 5 years, something 4 years, I think. And she's an incredible songwriter, and an amazing friend, and I love her so dearly, and she's like my sister, seriously. And I was very fortunate enough to, like, not have to, like, explain anything because the girl knew everything. Like, she let me be a broken record to her, much like my mom and my friend Abigail and my brothers and, like, all this stuff. So, like, I, like, I didn't have to explain what I wanted to say. I just knew the concept of the song, and I was like, "Okay, I wanna make sure that I say these things." And she did such a beautiful job of, like, teaching me how to condense detail without leaving anything out. Um, and she's just, so talented, and I can go on and on about her. But having also your best friend, like, I this entire EP, I worked with my best friends. So
Yeah.
that is just a whole different experience too, but Notes Page is definitely up there because there was a lot of information that I kind of just, like, word vomited into the
Yeah.
song, a lot of things that I had never talked about, publicly, unless you were a really, really close friend of mine and, knew the ins and outs about my life, but people that I grew up with, like, probably listened to some of the lyrics and was like, "Wait, what does she mean by that? Like, I didn't know that that happened in her life," or, like, whatever.
Mhm.
And but then Love Domenica, I I remember we were coming from the studio, from actually recording vocals for Notes Page, like, recording it in the studio, like, the demo for it. And Sanka, because she's from St. Louis, she was in town, so we went to, do that with Grace and, like, all of that, and we were gonna go meet, our friend Chris Donlin, who also co-produced, Love Domenica. And that was the first time I was ever working with him too, and I had been friends with him because he went to Belmont, like, we went to college together, so, like, the first time ever working with him, like, music-wise, and it was just so cool because, again, I was working with some of the greatest people and my friends, you know? But
Mhm.
Love Domenica was kind of like a a song that, Sanka played the guitar to, and it was very dreamy, and it was very much like, "This feels perfect to conclude the EP with." And to me, it was like, even though it's a signing off of this giant letter that I've written,
Mhm.
um, it was like a lullaby at the same time.
Yeah.
And my therapist, who I love, very, perfectly, described it as a surrender.
Mm.
And because she could tell that it was like, even though I wish things would have been so different, like, I'm coming to the reality, like, in the midst of writing this, I was like, "I'm coming to the reality of, like, this is the reality, and this is where our story ends, unfortunately." And, the strings, so this is like a little Easter egg, because there's lots of Easter eggs throughout the production, some of the songwriting, the cover art, like, they're just, like, very, very when I said I was very intentional about what I was doing with this project, like, I was very, very intentional. And some
Yeah.
things I'll keep a secret, and then some things I will definitely share.
Okay.
Um, but one of the little Easter eggs for the strings was, like, so at the very beginning of 24, I talk about I thought we had our forever love story written, and then in Love Dominica, I say, "But here's how our story ends," so it's in the beginning and the end of the EP. That's one little Easter egg.
Yeah.
That was not that was I will say, that was not intentional, but it happened and it was perfect. But something that was intentional was the strings, which I was trying to get to. I We kinda didn't want to we wanted to keep this song very short
Okay.
lyric-wise because, like, we wanted it to be left kind of like, um kind of like a little shocking of like, "Oh, wait,
Mhm.
that's it?" You
Yeah.
know? And the strings was something that Sanka was like, "Oh, what if we did like a little like a quartet, like a string quartet?" And immediately I was like, "Oh my gosh, you have no idea what you're saying to me right now," because, I talk about in the songs, like, how I thought, like, I was gonna marry this person, like, we talked about, like, wanting to marry each other, and that's such a beautiful, beautiful thing to, like, find somebody that you, really want to spend the rest of your life with.
Mhm.
And I was so excited, and like we both were. And something that I think that I wanted at my wedding was a string quartet.
Yeah.
And even though our story ended that way, I would like to end it like this. And so I ended it with something that I would have wanted our
Yeah.
relationship to have ended, like I wanted it to end the way that we wanted it to end, like with the wedding.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so like the string quartet was kind of like that way of like, even though I didn't necessarily get it here, like I'm gonna put it here, and it was a lot of closure, and it
Yeah.
was very sweet, and it just like it allows me also to just like look back and visualize throughout the strings just so many beautiful memories
Yeah.
and so much love and grace that was within that relationship, all of that. So yeah,
That is
those are my favorite songs, I would probably say at the moment.
yeah, no, I love that, and I love your explanation, and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful kinda serendipitous moment of the strings,
Yeah,
like you
that's a
mentioned,
great
and I
word for
think
it.
yeah, and I don't know, it just fills my heart, and, like, I'm just
Oh,
smiling just, like, hearing you talk about it because it's like, just to hear people talk about relationships in such a positive way after the fact, I think is just so
yeah,
beautiful to me because I don't know, I guess I don't know if that's, like, uncommon per se, but it feels like sometimes in the world we live in with just things going at a fast pace and
yeah,
everything like that, it's easy to get caught up in, like, the all the negative or the bad, or even if
absolutely.
things, like, blew up at the end, it's like,
And
we remember on those things and
Yeah,
not the
absolutely.
good.
And I'm not gonna, like, lie and say that there hasn't been any moment where I've just been so angry and so
For sure.
confused. I mean, I
Yeah.
talk about my confusion,
Mhm.
and, but at the end of the day, like, I truly give all the credit to the fact that through that very difficult season of my life, like, I was really leaning on the Lord, and I was
Mhm.
leaning that I knew that I could not overcome that by myself. And I
Yeah.
knew that the strength that I needed was from God and God alone, and, it allowed me to I will say that, like, my relationship with Christ, I've always, like, had a personal relationship with Jesus, but, um, it was so, like, never before, last year, and I think part of it is because I was surrounded by really, really incredible people that loved the Lord so deeply and so honestly, and I was in a relationship that the center of it was Christ, and like
Mhm.
I was so grateful to have been in a relationship. Like I have so many positive things to say, but this doesn't take away the fact that like it hurt, you know?
Right, right.
Um and but like my relationship with the Lord was on this like and it was on this high for sure, but I think that um we cannot forget that, like our like it goes in waves because that's just a part of life. Like things happen in life where like we either distance ourselves or like we feel like God is silent when he's like right there. He's just interceding within the silence and stuff, and
Right.
we're just not seeing it in the moment. But I truly could have easily, found other ways to like get over this person or whatever. And I'm just so grateful that I had such a strong support system that like pointed me back to Jesus
Yeah.
and pointed me back to the fact that like that I don't have to do this alone. And
Mhm.
also that I know that this is like I'm not the only one suffering too, you know?
Right.
And yeah, it was just like I give all the credit truly to the Lord because like I would not have been able to do this myself. And this positivity and overjoicing feeling that I have is something that like I've unraveled each and every day. And each and every day, I also experience moments of anxiety where I feel like the enemy is really trying to creep through and want me to be like, "Oh, but like remember this or you should feel this way or whatever." And it's like, "No, no, I shouldn't. I don't have to feel that way. I don't have to like hate a person at all because like I because what I feel is gratitude and joy, and I can look back and like you said, like even with your relationship, like you can look back at it recognize that like um you would never take back any moment of it,
Right.
and that yeah, the world is really pushing you out to be like, yeah, screw them, like all this stuff, and it's like, no, it doesn't
Mhm.
have to be that way, and it doesn't make you weak for thinking that way either.
Right. I think that's a great point, and I think, faith is something that is important to me, and I'll be honest and say that it hasn't always been a smooth journey in my life. It's been
Right.
something that I've embraced, I've distanced myself from, I've embraced. It's been kind of
Yeah.
a back and forth, but I think, at the end of it, why I could still speak positively about that relationship is just kind of, you know, God talks about love and
Yeah.
loving others and giving that love to the world and to others, and I think that that helped me through that tough season of my life of just having my faith, and I think we've all had those moments where maybe something bad happens or a string of bad things happen, and you get frustrated and you think like, "Well,
Absolutely.
like, if there is a God or if God's really, like, all loving, like, why would he let these bad things happen?" And I think that that can lead to, like, certainly as when I was younger, I maybe was resentful towards it. I think,
Yeah.
like, like, that's just kind of the dynamics of what going through your journey in faith and walking with God can look like. But I think at the end of the day, I'm glad that you had it as kind of like your relationship, your personal relationship with Jesus was something that you could and really embrace during that time. And certainly it helped me through my time. And it just, that love that we can receive even when we're struggling at our lowest points, it's always present.
Absolutely. I think something that I've learned in my faith journey is that God welcomes questions.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we think like, "Oh, God will never let me, like, ask a question because it's, like, either disrespectful or whatever," because I think that I mean, like, there's so many questions that in the Bible that people are asking Jesus, like, when he's present on earth and, like, all this stuff, and I think it's so beautiful that we have such a honest and real relationship we can have an honest and real relationship
Yeah.
with Jesus to where, like, doubt is not, like like, it's always welcomed because
Hmm.
he will provide,
Yeah.
and I mean, there were many times where I mean, there have been many moments in my life, not necessarily with this season, but just in many moments where I've, like, blamed God,
Yeah.
and I look back and I'm like, "How did I ever say that?" But he never turned his back on me. He never
Right.
left me. Like, he was more than anything, he had his arms wide open, being like,
Yeah.
"I'm right here, like, hear me out. Like, I'm right here." And
Yeah.
so I think that that's what's so beautiful, and I'm so grateful that God is faithful through and through. Like, I
Mhm.
can be the most, disobedient person, and he's not gonna fail me. Like, he's
Right.
a God that never changes, and I'm like, I am so undeserving of that, and but still he's like, "I'm right here." And
Yeah.
I think that that's so beautiful, because he welcomes us as we are, and then with a life with Christ, there's transformation, and it changes us in a way that it doesn't guarantee that life is gonna be easy, and I think that that's something that can be easily twisted, that once you're in
Right.
a relationship with Christ, like, life is just gonna be super dandy, and it's not. If anything, it might be a little bit more difficult, um, in certain situations, and I think that but you know where your hope comes from,
Yeah.
and that to me is like, I have nothing it's like a relief. I have nothing to worry about because, like,
Exactly.
if the birds of this earth don't have to worry about where their food is coming from, I can't imagine me being, in the image of God, like a human being that God knows every little detail about. He How could he not care for me?
Mhm.
So, yeah,
Yeah. I think it definitely gives a sense of just peace, and,
absolutely.
I mean, I think that that's, like and again, I get, being I don't know, like, in your late teens,
Oh,
20s, 30s,
absolutely.
however age, and, there's the angst and you're
Yeah.
questioning things, you're just like, "Oh my gosh, like, life sucks," or, like, you're
Totally.
stressing about getting into college or getting a job or whatever, and, like, that's all real, that's all real,
So
I've
real.
experienced it, I know you've experienced it,
Yes.
everyone listening's probably experienced it, but, like, I think once you if you are able to kind of root yourself in that relationship with Christ, like, you kind of like, for me at least, I've just had a sense of peace of, like, everything's gonna be fine, like, I'm fine. I have someone that loves me unconditionally and will always know me
Absolutely.
and know who I am and know how to use me the best possible ways for service and to help
Oh,
others.
yeah.
And just like it just gives me so much gratitude, and it just has calmed some of the anxieties that I have in my head at times about like, oh, what am I doing? What am I doing with my life or
Yeah.
whatever? Because I know that everything is working exactly how it's meant to be.
And it's crazy to me that there are times where I think I know what's best for me more than God knows what's best for me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, "What?" Like, it literally blows my mind because I'm like, "Domenica, like, can't you trust that God Almighty, the king of this universe, literally knows way better than you do, like,
Yeah.
what's best in your life?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I know that, but, like, I really want this." Like,
Right, right.
and so we find ourselves in moments where it's so human, obviously, to wanna be in
Yeah.
control. I fall victim to that so many times.
Yep.
But then when I'm, like, hit with the reality of, like, I might not get what I want, I can trust and put my faith in the fact that, like, God knows what's best for me, and I'm like, "Wow."
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna want what I thought I wanted when I discover what God has set apart for me.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's really the way that you put it is just so eloquently, and it's just a beautiful feeling when you do have that kind of like, I guess we'll call it like an epiphany when you
Yeah.
come to that realization.
Yes. Very much
Oh,
so.
I love that. That's awesome. So faith, of course, has always been an um, important just aspect of your life,
Mhm.
since you were younger to today and everything. So is that something that you would say has really influenced your music as well, and just like
Mm.
your kind of your writing style as well, or is it kind of almost separate
That's
topics?
a I really love that question because I've never actually thought about it,
Yeah.
but now that you're saying that, I really do think that there's a huge impact because
Mhm.
one of my favorite styles of songwriting is conversation,
Yeah.
and, like, just very conversational songwriting, and one of my favorite songwriters is Emily Weisband, and she's written for tons and tons of people in the country world, in the pop world, in the K-pop world, like, very much just, like, is an incredible songwriter, and she writes for herself as well, and she's based here in Nashville. She went to Belmont. I would love to meet her. I would love to learn from her, but, I mean, just conversational songwriting is so important to me because it feels the most organic and the most genuine to me.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I think storytelling plays into that, and when I find myself, praying literally all day long, like, instead of, like, talking to yourself, I'm having a dialogue with God literally every second of the day.
Yeah.
And so I guess that that is, like, a huge aspect of it because a lot of times, a lot of the things that I wrote about were questions that I asked God or, like, were, like, I'm on my knees praying, like, "God, like, why X, Y, and Z," or whatever, and so I just, like, am yeah, I've never put that into perspective, but it makes a lot of sense that, like,
Mhm.
it, like, um, plays into my songwriting because it's I guess it's just genuinely how I approach things in life is, dialogue and conversational, and I think that that's what's so special about having a personal relationship with Jesus is, like, he's not only your father, but he's your friend.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's I love that, and I will always I remember, when, like, you're asked maybe to pray, and, like, in front of a really big group of people, and, like, I remember being, encouraged to not be afraid to, like, have all these special words or have all these special things because God knows your heart, but also, like, you're having just a conversation with him, and
Mhm.
he's not gonna listen to you more or less if you use special words or whatever. He already knows the desires of your heart, but, like,
Right.
this is, so beneficial for your walk with Jesus, and so, yeah, I love that. Yeah, that's very I love now having that perspective of my
Yeah.
songwriting.
Well, good. I'm glad, and I love that you used, the word conversations, just
Yeah.
whether it's songwriting or just your relationship with God, because I think that that's something that I've kind of really embraced, and
Mm.
I used to talk to people, and they'd say like, "Oh, like, have you prayed today, or are you praying, actively praying, or practicing prayer?"
Yeah.
And like the answer was yes, but I'd always just respond by saying, "I'm just having conversations with God."
Mhm.
That's all it is. And they're like,
Mhm.
"What do you mean? Like, you don't pray?" I'm like, "No, I do, but, like, I'm not like, I'm having an open conversation and
Yes.
dialogue, and, like,
Yes.
I'm getting answers." And they're like,
Oh, yeah.
"You're hearing things back?" And I'm like, Yeah, like, I
Yeah.
mean, sure, maybe not, like,
Not like
vocally,
yeah,
but
it doesn't have to be like an audible voice, but like God
yeah, but
speaks in so many different ways. Yeah,
exactly. So
I'm
it really is
same
that
way.
ongoing dialogue,
Yeah.
conversation, like you said, yeah.
Yeah, and I
I
love
love that.
that. I literally love I've had so many revelations just of the Lord this
Yeah.
past week and differentiating God's voice versus the enemy's voice,
Mhm.
and I had a moment of, like, lies creeping in, like I had mentioned earlier, where I was like,
Yeah.
the enemy just like saying, well, you should feel this way, or like you, blah, 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 blah. Well, remember this, like, blah, blah, all those things. And I remember feeling like, why am I feeling this way? And it was because I was rejoicing with the Lord so much earlier this week that the enemy totally does not want me to stay there. Like, he wants me to fall
Right.
back into this negative place. And this is like in every area of my life. Like, he doesn't want me to be grateful towards God and like what he's
Mhm.
revealed to me, and like, and he doesn't want me to keep moving forward, because all I want to do, I literally said this like out loud to God. I was like, oh my gosh, I just want to tell the world. Like, I just want to tell the world. And that is completely the opposite of what the enemy wants. He
Right.
doesn't want you to share what God has revealed to you. He doesn't want you to share the good news that he has like expressed to you, the goodness, the mercy, the grace. Like, he doesn't want that.
Right.
Um and yeah, and so, and then in my Bible study that I had the same day that I was differentiating God's voice and the enemy's voice in that moment, or and honestly understanding like why that was happening to me in that moment, um my Bible study was about differentiating God's voice and the enemy's voice, and like picking moments in the Bible where God like had presented himself.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh my gosh, like I literally was like, God, you're so funny. Thanks for this. Like, this was such a confirmation too of just like
Right.
what I had unraveled that morning. And so
Yeah.
I just love that. I love when he speaks through people. I love when he speaks
Mhm.
through things that I'm reading, the scripture. Like, if I visualize something in my head that like I'm praying about, and like the Lord just reveals something to me, or literally an overwhelming sense of peace is enough that I'm like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, that's crazy. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I love it, and I couldn't agree any more with you, and kind of staying in a similar lane, but branching a little bit. I know
Mhm.
that you mentioned that, like, with, just some of the maybe the anxieties you mentioned that, were coming up with, the enemy kind of trying to get you in a more negative headspace or what have
Yeah.
you, and you mentioned, a therapist that
Yes.
have a good relationship with everything
Yes.
with and everything. I'm assuming, mental health is something that is pretty important to you then?
Oh, absolutely. I am
Okay.
very, very, very fortunate to have been raised in a household where, um, expressing emotion was, like, welcomed.
Yeah.
My friends like to joke that my brother and I are very in tuned with our bodies and, like, our emotions, and I
Mhm.
give so much credit to my mom for that, and my dad, but, like, my mom specifically, she came from a household where, like, it wasn't, not that it wasn't welcomed, it just, like, it wasn't normal to I mean, and it was also generation
Yeah.
too, where, like, mental health just wasn't a thing that people talked about, because that was, like, almost, like, a little bit taboo.
Right.
But my mom was like, I love my mom. She's my best friend. I seriously, I cannot speak enough about the type of woman that she is. Wise, just fully, just like wisdom and discernment. And she's before. I mean, I go to God first, but then like I go to her because like she can actually sometimes give me an audible voice that I want to
Right.
hear. But my mom was like when is and was, but growing up, anytime that we would like get really frustrated or like really angry with her, and I don't think I've ever said like I hate you to my mom, but like my mom was the type of mother or parent that, there's respect towards a child and a parent, obviously, but my mom was also the type of person that was like, okay, if you say you hate me, like, why do you hate me? Let's talk about it.
Mhm.
And or why do you feel this way? Like, why were you angry at me? Or my mom also was just also, she would apologize to me too, like when things would happen that she lost a little bit of control with, stress that she's going through, and she spoke to me in a manner that she didn't want to speak to me. And so like there was never this like um a sense of that she could not do that with us.
Yeah.
I love that my mom, like, we had a very open relationship to where I could just be honest with her, and, like, even if I did the worst thing in the world, I knew that I could come to my mom and not be fearful and not have her question me and my morals or whatever, but like truly would love me and receive me and, would tell me that whatever I did was not right. Like she would be honest with me, of course, because
Right.
that's showing love. But that she would never like turn her back from me.
Yeah.
And so I give my mom so much credit for that because like I think that that is what has allowed me to have a voice and speak up when other people are either being mistreated or like don't have a voice themselves. I'm like, no, like you can do that. Like you have every right to be respected
Right.
and to have dignity and to have all this stuff. And yeah, mental health is very important to me. And I think that but I will say I was the type of person that even though I had this like very open relationship with my mom, I was like, I'm not going to tell a stranger my problems. Like that's
Mm.
problems, quote unquote, because like I was like, they're not problems. Like I'm not going to talk to a stranger about this. And I remember there was a time in my life where I was really bitter. And a lot of the bitterness came from I don't think I've mentioned this, but my brother is a 3-time cancer survivor. And
Right.
so my whole life was in and out of hospitals.
Yeah.
And I at a very young age I had to learn to understand that all the attention was going to go to my brother.
Mhm.
Because my brother was dying.
Yeah.
Um and my brother and I are just a year apart, so we're very, very close in age. And he's my best friend as well. Like I'm very close to him. We live together, so it's just we're two peas in a pod. And but I had to grow up a little bit faster, and my parents did the absolute best that they could to try to balance as much as they like the attention as much as they could. But like at the same time, I a lot a lot more attention had to be placed on my brother.
Right.
Um and I think I felt so much pressure as a child to be the really strong kid,
Yeah.
and not I never wanted to be a burden to my parents because they already had enough,
Right.
especially with my brother. And I was like, I can do this, I can do this. So I bottled a lot of things up, and a huge struggle that I faced with was I hated being under my brother's shadow.
Mhm.
I was always known as Matteo's sister, and
Right.
for once in my life, I just wanted to be I wanted him to be Domenica's brother, or like just me be Domenica,
Okay.
or whatever. I struggled a lot with that, and it was it was coming and turning into a thing of pride, and it was really, really bad because then I was angry towards my parents, or like I was a middle school kid. I was also like learning my attitude a little bit and
Mhm.
learning how to control it. So like age has a lot to play into it.
Sure.
But I think that I was like, I'm not talking to any stranger about that. Like that's so weird. I can do this on my own. Like I thought I could
Yeah.
handle, as every kid probably goes through.
Right.
And I remember going to counseling, and I hated it because I was just so closed off. I didn't see it as something that was going to help me. I saw it as something that was shaming me.
Mhm.
And I was like, no, I don't want people, because I was so afraid of being a hypocrite.
Okay.
And I was so afraid that people were going to see the real me that was not this strong girl at
Yeah.
all. It was like I struggle so much with my identity of just like who I was. Like, am I always going to be Mateo's sister? And then in reality, I came to terms with the fact that like being the daughter of the king was enough. And that
Yeah.
was like so fulfilling to me. And I mean, that was like middle school, high school, I struggled with it, but I like kept it very hidden very well. And then I think my sophomore year of college was when like I had like on my knees kind of moment where I was like, oh my gosh, this whole time I was trying to find my identity in music. I was trying to find my identity in all these reality TV shows that I auditioned for, just to try to separate me from my brother.
Yeah.
Because I wanted, like it makes me so sad to think that like that was a place that I was in, but it was also just the enemy's lies to me that saying that I wasn't worthy.
Right.
And then just like the Lord revealing something that I always knew, but it didn't hit me the way that it did until that night. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm the daughter of the Almighty. I'm worthy. Like
Right.
I am enough through Him. Like He is sufficient. He is faithful, and He is what um is like the way that he views me is the way that I can learn to even love myself.
Yeah.
um so yeah, I don't even know how I got to this place, but yeah, like therapy. Yeah, I love therapy. Now I'm like, oh my gosh, like I love that I get to pay a therapist to like just talk my feelings
Right.
out, because she really makes me think. And I love that she's not someone who just listens to me and just like, yeah, like that's great. And there's a lot of like, she makes me think.
Yeah.
And I love that I have been able to do this for a long time now, and slowly start to like, okay, I don't need this as much as I like was doing like a weekly or like a bi-weekly. Like now it can be a monthly thing, and like
Right.
and then just knowing that I can that I have these skills that I've learned and I've strengthened myself, I've grown, I've healed, and knowing that it's okay to like feel a little weak one day, because healing is not
Yeah.
linear.
Right.
And but just like I love the fact that I'm very fortunate enough to have the ability to do that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think to me, you really walked through what I experienced with mental health, and I think a lot of people probably close to our ages do, where you go
Mhm.
through those times, in your teens and
Yeah.
and middle school, high school, where you don't want to talk about, your quote unquote problems or your life, or you don't want to open up to
No.
a stranger, or you think that you can handle it yourself, or it's not a big deal. And then, it's just I feel like that's maybe a generational thing,
Totally.
and what have you. But I think like just when you do open yourself up to the just like what you could get from
Mhm.
counseling and therapy, like I think
Yeah.
it could be such a great thing. And like I always say, like it doesn't matter if you feel like you're at the lowest point in your life or you feel like you're at the best, highest point of your
Exactly.
life. Like anyone can just to have those conversations with someone that doesn't know you, and like they're not invested in your
Exactly.
day-to-day
There's no
life.
bias.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
it just like I find that even just when you're talking to someone in that capacity out
Mhm.
loud,
Mhm.
you're starting to realize things on your own, and they don't even have to say a word, but you're
Absolutely.
just like using it as a sounding board too. And then of
Yeah.
course, you're learning skills and strategies and things from, a mental health professional, but
Yeah.
you're also just having that time with yourself and
Yes.
kind of reflecting out loud.
Yes. Yes. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I've learned so much of just like how I mean, I went through an experience where I very much came to the reality of like how powerful our minds can be, to the
Yeah.
point where like my therapist told me, she was like, Domenica, when you project a narrative, you tend to literally live it as if it were true. And I'm like, I know. And it's really bad because, and she's like, you don't have to do that. Like all it does is it either will produce anxiety or will boost an ego.
Yeah.
And most of the time it's the anxiety part, because it's mainly negative. But yeah, I found myself in a situation where I was so amazed at how little lies could creep through, and I start to dwell in them and spiral to where my
Mhm.
body reacts as if it were actually happening.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my gosh, my brain cannot distinguish whether it's reality or not, because like that's like, or my body can't really distinguish if it's reality or not, because like that is like it's just so powerful that way.
Yeah.
And my mom taught me, because my mom is so great at this too. I think my mom should have been a therapist. But my mom is like, and when situations happen like that, she was like, you have to face them. And I
Yeah.
was like, what? And she was like, yeah, you have to face it with truth. If something is bothering you and you know the reality, just face it with whatever facts that you know, and leave it at that. That's all you know.
Mhm.
And that has helped me so much, because there have been situations where like I will second guess one thing or second guess another thing, and then I'm like, okay, what is the actual reality in the situation? What do I know? And then I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, I just stay there. That's it. I don't have to keep dwelling on this, because I don't have to
Right.
worry about it until it becomes a reality, if it were to become a reality. And half of the
Right.
times it really
It
doesn't.
doesn't.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That is a really just good mindset to have, and a good kind of like practice to walk through. And
Yeah.
your mom sounds like she definitely should have been a therapist.
Yeah, my mom is amazing.
Yeah. Awesome. So one thing that, as you're kind of explaining your experience with mental health and everything, that came up, and I was a bit curious on,
Mhm.
so if you don't mind me asking you
Sure.
this, you mentioned that something that you struggled with, maybe earlier on in your life and throughout middle school, high school, maybe even parts of college, like, you felt like you were always, your brother's sister. That was kind of like your
Mhm.
identity, and you're almost maybe in a shadow of
Mhm.
sorts. But I know that you have such a close and strong relationship with your brother.
Yeah. Yeah, I
What was
know.
the yeah, like, so the dynamics of that, was that
Um,
how did
uh,
that work?
that's man, it sounds so like an oxymoron a bit because it's like you would think that I would just distance myself more with my brother,
Yeah.
but I think it's because it wasn't coming from my brother, that is why it
Okay.
didn't affect my relationship with him.
Yeah.
It was coming from other people, like,
Mhm.
people in my church community. It's not and they were not doing this maliciously,
Right.
obviously,
Right.
but the enemy made me think that it was this,
Yeah.
like, "Oh, they don't see that you're worthy, they don't" whatever, all this stuff. You're just your brother's sister.
Right.
But a lot of people were very invested with and very prayerful over the 3rd time my brother had cancer, um, because that was the time we were living in North Carolina, and we went to this church that was so filled with such an incredible community and very close-knit community of people.
Okay.
Um, and and that was, like all of this happened at the very, very, very beginning of us attending this church, so, like, not a lot of people knew who we were, but people like, the leaders knew of our family and were very open about encouraging others to be prayerful with them over our family, which is such a huge blessing to have that.
Mhm.
Um, and so I when we came back, like, everybody knew this miraculous story because, like, my brother the doctors had told my parents that my brother was gonna die and that they
Mm.
were just gonna make him comfortable, and my mom being the beautiful and persistent woman that she is, she was like, "No, you have to go back and you have to come up with a different answer." And my mom being bold like this is because she knew that she was like, "God is not done with him."
Right.
And I'm really grateful that my parents were, like, very respectful but unashamed of their faith when
Yeah.
handling, like speaking to doctors, which a lot of them were believers as well. And, but they're way more experienced and like more knowledgeable than my mother is. So of course, I'm
Right.
sure they probably like laughed a little bit, like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But then also they're like, oh, this is a concerned mother. Like, we totally get it. And then, but they listened to my mom. But I also think that that's just the Holy Spirit speaking through them as well, and they came up with this trial that if I'm not if I'm saying this correctly, my brother was the first child in the United States to ever do this. Maybe in the world, I'm not really sure, but I know that he was the first child at Duke Hospital, but potentially in the US. Um, to have received a T-cell transfusion. And again, if I'm getting this correctly, there was a 50-50 chance that either it would be successful or that his heart could burst.
Mm.
And so my parents, obviously my brother being a minor, had to be the ones to make the decision.
Right.
And my mom very distinctly remembers a conversation that she had with my brother that my brother does not recall, which I truly believe this was the Holy Spirit speaking, and said to my mom was feeling really regretful that she had brought her kids to this world just to suffer.
Mm.
And she was like crying out to God and being like, how I can't believe I brought these kids into this world just to suffer. Like, they're just gonna die and they're gonna die before me, like all this stuff, whatever. And my mom never liked to cry in front of my brother because she wanted to be strong, obviously.
Yeah.
There was
Yep.
one specific night, that same day that she was being very, very honest with God and saying that, where I think she was bathing my brother because he was a child too, but like needing that assistance.
Yeah.
And she saw his skin and how raw it was because of all the chemo and radiation and like
Mm.
all this stuff. And my mom like hid her head. Oh my gosh, I'm not gonna cry saying this, but like she hid her head from him because she was crying. And my
Mm.
brother lifts up her head. She's like, Mom. Oh my gosh, I'm getting emotional. Mom, you don't have to cry. Don't cry because I get to live for eternity with Christ. And my mom got the biggest confirmation of like, that's why I brought them here. I brought them to know you and to like spend eternity with you. And that was the biggest confirmation to her that we're going to do this trial. And so they did the trial and it was successful, obviously. and it was a miracle. And so that opened the door for other patients to be able to do that as well, which was such a blessing, and give truly God all the glory for it. But my whole church knew all of that. And so everyone knew this miraculous thing, even Matteo walking, even Matteo being completely off all his medication that they thought he was going to be on for the rest of his life is a huge miracle.
Yeah.
And so, them discovering that, it was obviously it's a testimony of God, not my brother, but the enemy was really trying to make it seem like it was all my brother.
Yeah.
And so when people, they'd be like, "Oh my gosh, you're Matteo, you're Matteo, I've prayed for you." And then they'd turn to me and be like, "Oh wait, what's your name?" And so
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh my gosh, I am I'm invisible."
Mhm.
And so I was like, "Okay, well, I'm gonna go find other things that are gonna separate me from my brother."
Yeah.
And the first thing was music. And I was like, "I'm gonna be a singer." I mean, I was always singing, but I was like, "I'm gonna do this." But then my
Right.
brother also really loves to sing, and I was like, "Oh no." He's following me. But then I became the girl that sang at church. And my brother didn't do it as often, not nearly as often as I did. And I'm not gonna lie and say that it was very fulfilling. I
Yeah.
was like, "Yes, finally. I'm getting noticed the way that I deserve to be noticed." And then it disappeared. That season, it was there for a season, and it was just like, "Oh, this is so empty." Because I was putting my worth in something that was not gonna be fulfilling at all.
Right.
And then, I started putting in other things. I started putting in all the reality TV shows that I've auditioned for, because I've done all of them. Like I said, I've done America's Got Talent, I've done The Voice, I've done American Idol, and I was leveling my worth to the success that I had on these shows.
Yeah.
And I was like, if I don't make it, if I don't win, if I don't I'm not worthy enough. I'm not good enough. And then I try to hide it by saying, "Oh no, it's okay, it's okay. I'm fine, I'm fine." And I was just pushing it all down until one day, and the day that I had this revelation from God was because I knew that they were not showing my audition for American Idol. But I had made it to Hollywood Week, and I got cut in Hollywood Week, and I just remember being so ashamed, and I was like, nobody can know that I failed.
Mhm.
And then I was in my room. My roommates were having a little Bible study that they were leading, and I just was very isolated in my room doing probably homework or something like that. And I got a
Mhm.
text from someone random, someone that I probably never spoke to on a weekly basis even, or
Yeah.
monthly. They're like, "Wait, did I just see you on American Idol?" And I was like, "What?" I felt like my whole world was being exposed, and I was like, "Oh my gosh." And there was a little clip that they had showed of me crying when I was in Hollywood Week, and of course,
Sure.
so humbling, right? But
Yeah.
I hated because I was only crying, and this is the truth. I was not crying because I was cut. I was really exhausted. But I was crying because my mom was there with me, and I thought I had disappointed her.
Mhm.
Just knowing all the sacrifices that she had done for me, even though I knew that my mom would not be disappointed in me.
Right.
But I wanted, I wanted it to do this for all of us.
Mhm.
Um, and I know that my mom has been my biggest supporter too. So it's like, "Oh man, I screwed up, I should have done better," all
Right.
this stuff. And of course, that's the part that they show, because it's my mom, pushing my hair, out of my face, and
Mhm.
encouraging me and loving on me, and all I'm doing is crying, but, trying to hold it back because I'm like, "I don't want this to get on TV," I don't want to give
Right.
them TV,
Right.
But it was so humbling to me because it made me really come to the reality of, this everything in this world, I'm gonna gain absolutely nothing if I put, all of my worth in the things of this world.
Yeah.
And that was the slap on the face of "Oh my gosh, it's been right in front of me that being the daughter of the king was sufficient, was enough."
Yeah.
So, yes. To your question, that is the so, it didn't never affected my relationship with my brother.
Yeah.
Um, besides, your normal, brother-sister rivalry.
Sure. Sure.
But I love my brother, and I'm so grateful for him, and yeah, we're still real, real close,
Yeah.
even in proximity, because he's, right in the next room.
And he's doing well and everything.
Oh,
Mateo's
yes, we're
been doing well.
celebrating 15 years cancer-free this year, which is the biggest blessing,
Yeah.
and, we're wanting to do something really special with that. I have no idea, but it's definitely gonna be up to him. I
Mhm.
think he wants to go to Disney World, and I would love to go to Disney
Ooh,
World
yeah.
because I love Disney. So we'll see, but I think my parents would like to do something else. But yeah, it's so crazy to think it's been 15 years,
Yeah.
and he's, living his best life. He is an aspiring director, and he's directed my music videos. He has worked with he's even partnered with companies like Love Your Melon, which they give beanies. Every purchase
Hmm.
gives a beanie to a child with pediatric cancer, and so it's very full circle for him, um, and he gets to work with like really really talented people here in Nashville. And I think I mean, my brother's dreams, if you get the opportunity to talk to him, he's a very great storyteller as well, which makes sense to why he is doing what he's doing. And I don't know if I'm allowed to speak about projects that he's working on, but like there are things that are very exciting that I cannot wait for him to just be able to show the
Yeah.
world. So I'm just very grateful to see that unravel for him as well.
Yeah, that's gonna be amazing. I'm so just happy to hear that he's been doing well, and, you know,
Yeah.
15 years is huge, and it sounds like he's doing incredible things, and I love the relationship and bond that the 2 of you share,
Oh,
and,
thank you.
I mean, just, again, sharing just you being vulnerable and sharing kind of your experiences and everything, it just very powerful, and I will say that I've been doing this podcast for this is year 3.
Oh, wow.
I've
Good for
recorded
you.
over thank you. I recorded over like 100 and I don't know, probably 120 episodes,
Wow.
and everything, but this is the first time on the podcast I have cried on a
Oh,
podcast recording when I
oh
was listening to you
my gosh.
talk, and when you were getting emotional,
Yeah.
like, when you started continuing on, I was like, "Oh my gosh," it hit me, and
Oh,
that's just the power of human connection and storytelling
totally.
and just everything we've talked about just with faith, and I think it just comes full circle where it's just like, wow, I feel just blessed and
Oh,
grateful to even have this conversation with you and to be opened up to an aspect of someone's life that I would have never known
oh my
otherwise, and
gosh.
just to hear the experiences that you and your whole family have been through, and it just it's wonderful.
Thank you. And it truly is
Yeah,
just a testament of God's faithfulness, like through
yeah,
and through. Like I cannot speak of that enough. Like I truly would not be the person I am if it wasn't for my relationship with Christ.
yeah. Yeah, and I mean, like you said yourself, you've been through different seasons of life, you know,
Yeah.
a lot of good, a lot of maybe challenging and tough. And
Yeah.
when I talk to you now and listen to all your experiences, I feel like I just can hear this sort of confidence and conviction in your voice that
Mm.
you truly know your purpose and who you
Thank
are
you.
and who kind of is guiding you, you know,
Mm.
through this life and providing for you. And I think that that's just amazing. And
Thank you so much.
obviously, I didn't know you when you were, I didn't know you 10 years ago. I haven't known you for long
Yeah.
at all, but I can just hear the growth that you've experienced, and it's incredible.
Thank you so much. That
Yeah,
really means a lot to me.
of course. Of course. Thank you again for just the vulnerability and sharing. And though I think the one question that I'll end it on as we start
Yeah.
wrapping it up is, you've been on these reality shows,
Yeah.
you've done live performances, you have music on streaming services.
Yeah.
Out of those 3 things, or if there's something I'm missing, like, what are you the most nervous about? Like
Ooh. Oh my gosh. Um, Probably the streaming part because
okay.
because, like, once it's out there, it's out there,
Yeah.
versus, like, reality TV, like, doing those shows, it's typically live or it's like I'm in the moment doing it,
Mhm.
versus, like, this is months and months of preparation, and I'm a huge perfectionist, if you can't tell. And I there's ups and downs and wonderful and terrible things that come with having that kind of mindset.
Mhm.
Um, and so there were times where, like I said, 24 took me 4 times to get the vocals right. And it was a
Mhm.
me thing. Everyone else was like, "Domenica, these sound the same," or whatever, and I think it's 'cause I'm like, "Oh, no, it's because it's gonna be there, and, like, people are gonna listen to the
Yeah.
same thing over and over again," God willing that they'll listen to it over and over again,
Uh,
but, like, um, yeah, I think that is, I don't know, and you want there's a lack of human connection just because it's through, like,
yeah.
a screen or whatever, so I think that I'm like, "Oh, man, I really hope that they get the human connection behind
Yeah.
it." And I think that this is not again, not that I'm discrediting my other songs, but I do think that this is a completely different level of human connection that I've been able to portray in my
Yeah.
EP, that I'm so grateful for, to where I like, when the things were finished, I was like, "This does not need to be touched again. Like, this is
Right.
done. This is exactly what it needs to be," and I'm so excited for people to hear. And I think the ultimate goal is like for me to like take something that was from my heart or like straight out of my personal journal, um to have people see their own stories within my songs. I'm like, okay, when that happens, like, it's a job done,
Mhm.
job well done, because I truly believe that like anyone, it doesn't have to be the exact same situation, like anyone can see a little bit of themselves in absolutely anything, just because like every human goes through everything, like
Yeah.
and a lot of times they're just left unsaid, or and when you, oh my gosh, one of the biggest, most amazing feelings is to be understood.
Yes.
And having that in music for me has been like, I've oh my gosh, the amount of songs that I've listened to that I'm like, "Did they, like, talk to me and, like,
Yeah.
write the song about my life?" Or and I'm like, "How?" Or like, "Why didn't I write that?" Like, that was,
Mhm.
all those things, and I think we find ourselves in, like, in other, creative outlets that we've like, in movies or books or whatever, but for me, it's mainly been in music, so I'm just like, it's because we're human, like, we feel those
Mhm.
things, and until they're said, like, then we feel understood, and it's such a beautiful feeling. So
Yeah.
I think that's the ultimate goal when it comes to like my music is, yes, I'm doing this for myself, and putting it out there for me, but I'm also doing it knowing that like I want someone to feel understood,
Yeah.
and know that they're not alone.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love that question. I mean, I'm not gonna say that like like I'm not scared when I do things like The Voice or live performances in general, because like you don't know necessarily the outcome of things, but I
Right.
truly believe that if you put in 110% and you put in your heart when you do all those things, like that's enough.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It is. Just giving it your all and just being yourself. That's always gonna be
Exact
enough.
Oh, being so authentic to yourself, like that is never, never let anyone tell you to be somebody else, because there's never gonna be another person like you,
Yeah.
and trying to be somebody else is going to become very, very difficult the more and more you try, and it's so easy to just be yourself, and,
Yeah.
um, and again, like, there's no one like you, so
Exactly.
why not be yourself, you know? So
Exactly. I agree, and, I think that that's something that everyone should take and embrace being themselves, but
yeah,
especially if you're in the creative space and
yes,
especially music or acting or
yeah,
something, like, you probably will have people say, "Oh, you have to be this way or that way to be successful," or whatever, but be yourself because you are enough as
yes,
you are, and
exactly,
you are you for a reason. So,
exactly.
yeah. No, I mean, I love your answer, and, I think when I asked that, I was thinking to myself, I was like, "I feel like you're gonna say streaming."
Yeah.
And, I get the reason behind it and everything now, and the cool full circle thing is, like, hearing you say that, you personally have listened to songs or music and you're like, "Wow, I feel understood."
Yeah.
And then you want that became a goal of yours, and I can sit here and say that I listened to your EP the first time through, and I was like, "I feel like someone understands or
Oh,
someone gets it." So, what
thank
you felt and what
you.
you wanted to do, you've done.
Oh
So
my gosh, that's like that's one of the biggest gifts, is to receive that, so thank you so much for saying
yeah,
that.
yeah, you're very welcome. Well, Dominica, to anyone that's listening and they want to check out your EP
Yeah.
or just stay in touch with what's going on with music for you, or, what's the best ways to kind of keep up with everything that you're up to?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have all of my music as my name, Domenica Coka, on all DSPs, whatever, wherever you listen to your music, like I'm there. And I'm very active on my Instagram, which is at Domenica Coka, as well as my TikTok, which is also at Domenica Coka. Don't use Twitter as often, but I'm also there too. Same username. And yeah, I think, something that I love about social media is having the balance of not only sharing your musical side, but also sharing a part of who you are as a person in your day-to-day life. And I think I like to do that through my social media. I think it's fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, I share a lot there, and you'll hear about upcoming projects through my socials, and just like fun little things that you might learn about me if you want.
Awesome. Well, I will put all your socials and everything in the description of this episode.
Okay.
So if you're listening along and you didn't catch Domenica say what her socials were and everything, or where you could find her music, it will be in the description. So just go click down there and go connect with her. She's a fantastic person to just kind
Thank
of
you.
learn about and learn from and hear all the cool things she's up to. So definitely encourage you all to give her a follow, give her EP a listen. It truly. I'm not just saying this. Like, if you listen to the podcast, you know, like I'm a big music person. So like, I wouldn't just say it to say it. I
Oh,
truly believe that this EP is incredible and something that anyone should at least give a listen. And I think I know you will feel something or feel some sort of connection or feeling of understanding. So please do go stream Domenica's EP. It's fantastic.
thank you so much, Zach. This
Yeah,
has really been an honor. Thank you for letting me be a part of your podcast. This is so
of
great.
course. Yeah, thank you so much for being on. I really appreciate it. And the honor's all mine, and I'm super happy to have you. And is there any, I guess, last thoughts or words that you want to share with the listeners?
Um, I think that, man, I think one of the things is like, uh, just like seeing life in a way that you can be like grateful and joyful. Oh my gosh, the blessings that it offers,
Yeah,
even in the midst of like really hard times, when you change your perspective to that without completely diminishing any of your feelings, how life-giving it is, and how much of a blessing it is. Especially, I mean, obviously for me, I'm going to be biased and be like, with your relationship with Christ, like how truly transformative life can be. But you've created such a safe space for me, so thank you so much for inviting me. It really, really, I know you said the honor's all yours, but man, like it truly has been an honor, and I felt very, very supported and just very safe sharing bits and pieces of my heart. So
well,
thank you.
good. Yeah, so I think that was a beautiful kind of message to leave, and you're very welcome. I'm extremely grateful for the chance to connect with you and to give you the platform and the space to share things that have been your experiences and what's on your heart. And I know I don't have to tell you this because I know you know to just
Um,
be you and embrace,
Thank you.
but I will continue to say just keep being the person that you are, because you are doing incredible things in your personal life, in your professional life with music. You are telling stories and impacting so many people and just creating music that people can truly feel heard and understood, and just like they're not alone in life. So I cannot even begin to tell you how excited I am to just see what else you do in your career and to support
Thank
you along
you.
the way.
Thank you so much, Zach. I really
Yeah,
appreciate that.
you're very welcome. I will talk to you soon.
Yay, thank you.
Yep. Bye.
Bye.